Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'm Lee, and in this video we'll be taking a look at the Kill Team FAQ, Errata and Commentary. A much needed FAQ was released today for the new Kill Team. So in this video we'll be going through the updates for the Compendium, the core book, and also the Octarius book as well. And if you're new to Games Workshop and haven't seen the FAQs before, then I'll put a link in the description below that will take you to the Warhammer community site. And in the header, you'll see a link for FAQs and downloads. And then if you click the FAQ, it's going to take you to this page here. And then as you scroll down, you can just work your way across using the arrows to Kill Team. And then it shows us there's 4 updates ready to go. So we're going to get an errata for the Compendium, core rules, the Commandos and the Veteran Guardsmen, and some designer's commentary for the Compendium and core rules. And I think we really needed this because there's quite a few things in there that are either errors or just don't make an awful lot of sense. So let's get started and we'll go through the Compendium first. Before we jump into the Compendium, I've just finished recording the whole video and I'm just going to put this little bit in the beginning. I don't normally do this, I normally record it, check it's okay, and then we're good to go. But it's just gone on a lot longer than I thought. So what I've done is put timestamps in the video so you can jump to the errata that you're the most interested in. So there's quite a lot going on in this video, and so if that helps you out, then that's great, and then you can jump straight to the one that you're interested in. Okay, let's get on with it, and now we'll go and look at the errata for the Compendium. So here's the errata 1.0 for Kill Team Compendium, and so anything that's amended, any amendments we need to make to the rules, that's going to be highlighted in blue. So as we work through, you'll see there's sections in blue. So that's what we've got to add to the rules that we've got in our Compendium. In this video, I'll focus more on the core rules and we'll read through it and also see the designer notes for the core rules. But here you can see the updates for the different factions in the Compendium. So I'm not going to go through each one of these individually. I think it's more important to focus on the core rules for now because that's going to apply to everyone. But if there's a certain faction you like to play, then it's well worth checking out this errata to see if any of their rules have been updated. And also check out the designer's commentary for the Compendium as well, because there's just a few questions in there, not many, and there's just 4 or 5 questions, and so these might apply to you if you play Craft World or the Troop or Hunter Cadre, for example. So that's all available, and I'll put a link in the description below that will take you straight to this. Okay, so that's covered the Compendium. Now let's take a look at the core rules, and here we've got the errata. Again, it's 1.0. The same thing's going to apply. We're going to get the blue highlighted changes there. So the first one is on page 70, and this is for line of sight and cover. And we've just got a little bit to add in there that says unless that operative is not itself in the active operative's line of sight. So that's just a slight amendment there. But the next one on page 72, we can get to add a following trait to the terrain traits, and this is called scalable. So it tells us that the scalable trait can be applied to terrain features more than 2 white circles tall. So that's going to be 4 inches, more than 4 inches. Each time an operative climbs this terrain feature, the final incremental distance of less than 1 white circle is ignored instead of being rounded up to 1 white circle. So this is just tweaking or adding a little difference to the climb here. So on this certain terrain trait, we're going to be able to change how we climb it. So another rule there to add to the climbing rule, I think. So yeah, how many rules do we need? I'm not quite sure, but there we go. We can add another terrain trait called scalable. Next, we've got an amendment to the drop rules. This is on page 75, and so we now need to add in that the operative can drop from that terrain feature, counting the vertical distance it travels towards the total distance it moves. The vertical distance is measured in increments of white circle, rounding down. And note that a total vertical distance of less than a white circle is therefore ignored. An operative can perform a dash action during a drop in order to reach its intended destination. So with this one, I'm just seeing a rewording of the rule rather than a real change. But there is that addition of being able to perform a dash action during a drop in order to reach that intended destination. So that's a real add-on. But I think the rest of that update really just changes the language and makes it maybe a little bit easier to understand, maybe not. And then we've just got an amendment to the mission packs on page 93 that tells us if you've scored 3 or more victory points from security or infiltration TAC ops during the battle, you'll gain 1 additional requisition point. So just a slight change to that little rule there. That covers the errata, so now let's have a look at the designer's commentary, and we're going to have a couple of pages here that goes into a little bit of detail about line of sight and other questions that have been raised. So here we go, we've got the designer's commentary 1.0, and I'm not going to read through this because I think this is something that's best done on the tabletop with some pieces of terrain, some miniatures, and just really reading through and breaking it down. But we're looking at the different cover lines, obscuring, and I mean there's so much going on here for line of sight. It's almost like too much. I just think if we need to go into this much detail about a rule, then maybe it's just not written that great from the start. So I don't like to be negative about it, but I think from going through the rules and learning them and then trying it out on the table, playing a bunch of games and really trying to get into it, it's just been a real painful journey trying to get the hang of line of sight and cover and of being obscured and all that. And now this doesn't really add to it. It almost makes it a little bit more confusing. So I think I'm going to work through the examples they've given here with some pieces on the tabletop and see if that helps out any more. But hopefully from this it might answer some questions you've had about line of sight. But I just think maybe the whole line of sight rules right from the beginning just need a complete rewrite. It doesn't need to be this complicated. So I think for the rules they've put in here and the examples, the question and answers, I'll do a separate video just dedicated to line of sight. I've been meaning to do it anyway, so I can include this in it now. So I think this is good timing. So yeah, I'll include the Q&A from this in that video, and I'll put that up over the next couple of days. Right, now we've got some questions for characteristics. And the first question is, how are modifiers to the movement characteristic applied? And the answer is that modifier is applied to the total rather than to each increment. And the example they give is that if an operative has a movement characteristic of 3 white circles and then 1 black triangle is added to it, the modified characteristic would be 3 white circles and 1 white triangle, and it wouldn't be 3 white circles with 3 black triangles. So we're not going to add 1 black triangle to each white circle. We're just going to apply that to the total movement rather than each increment. So that makes a lot of sense. So that's a good one. How are you finding these shapes? So I'd love to know what you think about them. Is it good, bad? I'm just finding the more I play it and the more rules I read, the more I dislike the whole shape thing. So, but I'd love to know what you think. So let me know in the comments below. That'd be awesome. Right, and the next question asks, do modifiers to the movement characteristic affect how far an operative can move when it performs a dash action? And the answer is no, unless a rule specifically mentions the dash action. For example, if 1 white circle was subtracted from an operative's movement characteristic, it would still move up to 1 blue square when performing a dash action. However, if a rule states each time an enemy operative performs a dash action, then it would be affected. So that one's pretty straightforward. As long as it doesn't mention the dash action, then the modifiers to the movement characteristic won't affect it. And then the final question for characteristics asks, if an operative's action point limit is modified during its activation, will the action points it generated for that activation be affected? And the answer is no, unless otherwise specified. And action points are generated after determining an operative's order for its activation. So modifiers after that point won't affect how many action points it has for its activation. Modifiers to an operative's APL when it is activated, for example, if the commando knob uses it to get it done ability on itself, could affect the action points generated, as this happens before it generates action points. I'm glad they've addressed this, because this is something that came up after I did the video for the battle report that was featured on Warhammer Plus, as we saw that get it done ability being used quite a lot by the commando knob, who also used it on himself. So I'm glad they've addressed that here in the characteristics. So this is really good. So that covers page 1. Now we're on to page 2, and we've got a few questions for move in here. So the first one asks, if an operative moves onto a vantage point, must its base be wholly on it, or can part of its base be over the edge? And the answer is, so long as the operative can be placed without falling, its base can be over the edge. So that's really good to know. As long as you can balance that model there, they can stay where you put them. And then the next question is, when climbing and dropping, does an operative get any free horizontal movement? And the answer to this is no. All horizontal movement must be measured as well. And being within one black triangle simply qualifies it to begin a climb or drop, but you must still measure that horizontal distance as normal. Therefore, if an operative does not have enough movement to be placed on that terrain feature without falling, or enough to fully move its base off that terrain feature, they can't complete that climb or drop, so then you'd have to think about another action to use with it instead. Now, continuing with movement, we've got a question about fly, and it says, can the fly keyword allow a friendly operative to perform an action in which it moves that would ordinarily be prohibited while within engagement range of an enemy operative? For example, a normal move action. And the answer is no. The rules for fly apply when the operative would be physically moved. However, being within engagement range of an enemy operative prevents the operative from performing a normal move action in the first place. Therefore, it must perform a fallback action to move. So that makes sense. If you've got an operative that's in base contact or within that 1 inch engagement range of an enemy operative, they're not going to be able to just like fly away, as they're going to be engaged in some kind of combat or tussle with that enemy operative. So I think narratively that makes a lot of sense, and also within the rules too. And then there's a final question on the moving, which asks, how does an operative move across stairs or an angled slope? And the answer is, unless specified otherwise, the operative can move across them freely. They don't need to climb them or anything like that. So again, that makes sense. An angled slope, a stairs, that's not going to really slow them down, so they can just use regular movement on any pieces of terrain that have those features on them. Right, let's keep going. This is getting much better after seeing those line of sight and cover rules and discussion just now. I was getting a bit concerned, but things are getting a bit better. So let's have a look now at the shooting questions. And these questions are for shooting attacks, but also fighting in combat. And the first question asks, when fighting in combat, some abilities, for example, Storm Shield, which is in the Kill Team Compendium, cause a parry to discard 2 of your opponent's successful hits. How does this interact with normal and critical hits? And the answer is, if the operative parries with a normal hit, they select up to 2 normal hits from their opponent to be discarded. If the operative parries with a critical hit, they select up to either 2 critical hits, 2 normal hits, or 1 critical and 1 normal hit from their opponent to be discarded. Great, so I think that explains that one nicely as well. So you get those with that Storm Shield, you can discard 2 of your opponent's successful hits, and it just lays out exactly which one of those hits, whether they be normal or critical, that you can discard with that ability. So that's really great. Nice explanation there. And the next question asks, how does an operative not equipped with a melee weapon interact with fighting in combat? And the answer is, do not select a melee weapon or roll attack dice for it. It cannot provide combat support. So another good explanation. I guess if they don't have those on their data card, then they can't perform that action or attack, so that makes sense too. And continuing with the shooting and combat questions, the next one asks, if an operative is incapacitated and is affected by a rule that states it isn't removed from the kill zone, for example in Death, Atonement, Tactical Ploy for the Veteran Guardsman, and only in Death does Duty End Tactical Ploy for Space Marines and Grey Knights, what happens when it fights in combat? Specifically in the Resolve Successful Hit step, it states you resolve your successful hits until one operative in that combat is incapacitated. Does that mean the Veteran Guardsman can't resolve successful hits as it is already incapacitated? And the answer is yes. As such, being incapacitated but temporarily remaining in the kill zone will not allow the operative to resolve hits in combat. So I guess if it's incapacitated, we do continue to treat it as incapacitated for the rules that apply to combat. The next question, again still shooting, it asks if a shooting attack is made against an operative in cover with a 6+ save characteristic. If the defender would retain a defense dice as a result of cover, would it still be a successful normal save, or would it be a successful critical save, as they couldn't otherwise roll a normal save? And the answer tells us it would still be a successful normal save. Cool, so that makes sense too. I think it's pretty straightforward. So now let's move up and we'll go and take a look at the questions for special rules and critical hit rules. And the first question asks, when fighting in combat or making a shooting attack, if an operative has multiple special rules and critical hit rules that would take effect at the same time, in what order are they resolved? And the answer is that the operative's controlling player can choose the order for rules that would take effect at the same time. And note that this is an exception to the usual method of resolving simultaneous rules in which the player with the initiative determines the order. Also note that if one rule is stated in the roll attack dice step and another stated at the end of the roll attack dice step, do not take place at the same time, so the latter must be resolved last. So yeah, that makes sense too. I mean, you're not going to do apply a rule that in the sequence comes later on in the sequence than a rule that comes earlier on. So yeah, I get that. So that's pretty cool. So that makes sense. Nice. Right, we've got one other question, the special rules and critical hit rules. And I wonder if you've thought about any of these questions yourself before. I haven't actually come across these as I've been playing the games over the last week or so, for sure. But maybe you have, so hopefully this is helping you out. But let's keep going. And the next question asks if an operative has a rule that allows it to repeat a specific combat or shooting attack, for example, as a result of the veteran of the Long War tactical ploy for the traitor Space Marine. Can it do so if a weapon with the limited special rule was selected for that combat or shooting attack? And the answer is yes. In this instance, you could use the weapon again, even if it has the limited special rule. So that's pretty straightforward again. You can use that even if it has the limited special rule. So yeah, there's lots of rules that cross over in this game. And especially when you're playing like the different factions and you're going from their data cards, the special rules that come to them, and then you're bringing in things like the strategic ploys and all things like that. It really does start to get complicated. At first, I thought this was going to be a really easy game. When I looked at the core rules to start, I'm like, oh, it's only like, 20, 30 pages, and they all looked really nice with lots of examples. But the more I played it, the more complicated it started to get. And I really just think this Q&A is just showing just how complicated it is, with so many nuances within it and how these rules are all crossing over and affecting each other. There's a lot going on here. Okay, now we're moving on to general principles, and the question asks, how do you resolve contrasting rules? For example, the Contagion strategic ploy for the Death Guard and Chaos Demon means enemy operatives are treated as being injured, but the Emperor's chosen ability for the Talons of the Emperor means the operative cannot be injured. And the answer is, in such circumstances, cannot takes precedence. The Emperor's chosen ability would prevent the operative from being injured as a result of the Contagion strategic ploy. There may be some rules where specific wording overrides this though. For example, a rule might say the operative is treated as being injured, regardless of any rules that say it cannot be injured. In this instance, the Emperor's chosen ability would not prevent the operative from being injured. So again, an example of all these different rules linking in, overlapping and affect each other. So yeah, you just got to really look out for that cannot, but then look out for any rules that include cannot and make it so that the cannot doesn't apply to it. So yeah, not sure about that one. I haven't been playing Death Guard yet, or the Talons of the Emperor. I don't have any, so I haven't played those. So I'm not sure about that. I haven't come across this one either, but maybe you have, and hopefully this has answered that question for you if it's come up. Okay, this is pretty awesome to get a short question, and it asks, does Overwatch count as an activation? And the answer is simply no. So we know that an operative can go into Overwatch if they've activated already, and so that's when it would come into play. So it doesn't cost any actions, and it doesn't count as an activation. But I think it's important to note that each operative can only go into Overwatch once. So I think that's important to note there, and maybe they could have added that in it too. And just for clarity, it's an operative can go into Overwatch once per turning point, so not just once for the whole battle, once per turning point. And we've got one more question on general principles that asks, if an operative would be injured from more than one rule, are the effects applied more than once? For example, an operative has fewer than half of its wounds remaining and is within one blue square. I don't know why I said one white. One blue square of an Anathema Psychana operative with the Creeping Dead strategic ploy for the Talons of the Emperor. And so the answer to that is no. In such instances, The creeping dread strategic ploy would have no additional effect on that operative. Probably one of the most wordy paragraphs I've ever read. But there we go. So that answers that. So the creeping dread strategic ploy would have no additional effect on that operative in this case. Next, we got some questions about missions, and the first one asks, when setting up additional barricades, for example the fortify option in the scouting step, can they be set up on a terrain feature? And the answer is no, unless that terrain feature has the insignificant trait. So I guess the idea here is people wanting to put that on top of the kind of buildings and the ruins and things like that, but it looks like you can't unless it's got that insignificant trait. And the next question is relating to the consecrate ground action, and that's in mission 1.2, and it modifies an operative's action point limit characteristic until the start of the next turning point. And as this modifier doesn't generate any additional action points for the operative's activation, as explained in the characteristics commentary above, what is the effect of this? And the answer says it means the operative is better at controlling objective markers and tokens until the start of the next turning point, which is determined by the APL. And note that until the start of the next turning point is an exception to the usual APL modifier time frame, which is usually until the end of the operative's current or next activation, whichever comes first. I don't know about you, but I'm just finding these really difficult to read through. I mean, it's just written in such a way that it's just not straightforward at all. But basically, this is all referring to the control of objective markers and just affects how that works for the mission. So hopefully that makes sense to you. And again, if that question's come up during your gameplay, hopefully that's answered it for you. And we've got another question that relates to missions, and it asks, the Rob and Ransack TACOP card differs from that presented in the core book. Which one is correct? And the answer is the one printed in the core book. So use the card to generate the TACOP, but use the rules presented in the core book. So, okay, so you're going to use the card to generate a TACOP, but then you're going to have to refer to the book to get the actual rules for it. So there's an answer to that one. So again, having rules in all these different places, it's just, there's going to be lots of mistakes, and we're just seeing more and more of them, it seems, as we read through these questions. So there we go. So that's the answer to that one. And that finishes the questions for missions. And now we've got a question about kill zones. And the question is, for scrap pile terrain features in Killzone Octarius, can an operative perform a dash action in the same activation in which it performs a charge over action, even though a charge over action is treated as a charge action? And the answer is yes. This is an exception for that terrain feature. So usually if you're doing a charge action, then you're not going to be able to perform that action in the same activation in which it performed a dash action. But with the charge over, then that's going to be an exception for the rule, and that's an exception for that particular terrain feature. So in this case, with a charge over action, you're still going to be able to perform that dash action in the same activation. There we go. That's all the Q&A from the Core Rules Designers Commentary 1.0, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot more questions asked than just the ones that were featured here. Line of sight, again, I'll do a video on that later on because there's so much to cover in it anyway, and I think with these additional questions, it's going to add to that video anyway. So yeah, I'll definitely be doing that in a couple of days. But now let's go back to the Warhammer community site, and we'll click on the Commando Errata now, and we'll go and have a look at that. And again, it's Errata 1.0. Okay, so the first question relates to page 61, and I'm really glad this is in here. This is the Commando Breacher Boy, Breacher Ram. And now we change the brutal rule from a critical hit rule to a special rule. So that's the first part. But then we also have to do something about this bull charge ability, and we have to change it so that it reads, each time this operative fights in combat, if it made a charge move during that activation, that bit's the same. But the bit we change says, its Breacher Ram gains the stun critical hit rule for that combat. So now this makes a lot more sense. This was really confusing when I did the Fighter in Focus video for the Commando Breacher Boy, and someone pointed out in a translated copy they had that the stun rule was included in it. So that made so much sense. It's really good to see that they've updated that here. And if you've been playing with the Commando Boys, then perhaps this is something that's been bugging you as much as it's been bugging me. But now we've got the answer to it. So that's great news. And the next update here is for page 64 for the Commando knob, and it's to do with the keywords. And so we just need to add the following keyword, which is leader. So we have to add that leader keyword on his data card too. So a couple of updates there, and there's one final update for the Commandos, and it's on page 66, which is the smoke grenade action. And we have to just slightly change the third sentence to read, until the end of the turning point, an operative is obscured if every cover line drawn to it crosses an area of smoke. So originally it said until the end of the turning point, an operative is not visible if a cover line drawn to it crosses an area of smoke. And so we're changing quite a bit here. We're going from not visible to being obscured, and rather than being a cover line, it's now every cover line drawn to it. So that's quite a big change there actually to that one. So that's really good. But there's quite a lot we've got to add and tweak in the book here already. And considering we've only had it like, what, a month? It's not ideal, really, this. Okay, but not to worry. I guess it's a new game. We've got to expect it to some degree. It just seems like there's a lot of amendments here. But anyway, let's get on with it, and let's have a look at the Veteran Guardsman Errata now. Again, we're on to 1.0, and here we've got 6 amendments to look at. And the first one is on page 44 for the Guardsman Orders, and we have to add the following sentence. If more than one Guardsman order could be issued by your kill team during the turning point, for example, the Inspirational Leadership Tactical Ploy from page 45, they must be different Guardsman orders. So on page 44, we've got 4 Guardsman orders that can be issued. They're move, 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 take aim, hold position, or fix bayonets. And there could be a time where you can issue more than 1 Guardsman orders. And so this update here, this additional sentence that we've got to put into the rules, is basically saying that you can't choose one of them twice. So you say you had the opportunity to give 2 orders, you couldn't choose take aim twice. So you have to pick one and then another one for your second order. And next on page 45, we've got tactical ploys in death atonement. And we have to change the second sentence to read, or the end of the battle, whichever comes first. So we're just adding that little bit in. That wasn't included originally on page 45. So we're just adding that little bit where it says, or the end of the battle, whichever comes first. That doesn't really affect a great deal of things, that one. And now we've got some changes on page 46 and 48. We're changing some of the ballistic skill characteristics. So the first one is the Sergeant Veteran on page 46. And we're changing the Plasma Pistol ballistic skill to a 3+. So this is good news if you like playing the Death Corps of Krieg. This is an improvement. So with our ballistic skill, the lower the number, the better. So originally, that Plasma Pistol had a ballistic skill of 4+, but now we can change it to 3+. So that's really good news. And the next one we've got is the Confidant Veteran Bolt Pistol, which we're going to change to 4+. So now the bolt pistol originally had a 3+ ballistic skill. So this guy's taking a hit now. This is a little bit of a backwards step for him. So although we had an improvement there for our sergeant, this guy certainly is getting worse for him. And now sticking on page 48, we've got a little addition for the Demolition Veteran, the Detonate ability, and we just need to add a little bit to the second sentence. So it should now read, when making those shooting attacks, each operative is treated as being visible and not obscured, but when determining if it is in cover, treat this operative's mind token as the active operative. So originally in the Octarius book there, it didn't include that and not obscured, so it just was being treated as being visible. But now it's being treated as visible and not obscured. So a slight update there, but I think it's a quite important one, so a good one to note. And now we've got one more left to look at, which is page 49, where we're going to look at the Medic Veteran Medic ability. And here we change the relevant part of the first sentence to read, the first time another friendly Veteran Guardsman operative would be incapacitated. So this is really just adding that another friendly Veteran Guardsman, just so you can't use this medic ability to revive the medic themselves. They can't revive themselves, so it makes sense to put that word in there. But man, what a difference just putting one word will make to an ability like that. So that covers now all the changes there and all the updates for the Death Corps of Krieg as well. And that finally brings us to the end of all the erratas and the commentaries. There was a lot to go through here in this video, and we didn't even read through the section about the compendium, but hopefully this has answered some questions you might have that have come up during your games. I think the Commandos, the Death Corps of Krieg updates make a lot of sense. I'm really glad they've put those in there. They've made some changes. I think a few people will be unhappy about the Confidant Veteran Bolt Pistol taking a hit, but good news for the Sergeant and his Plasma Pistol, which has been improved. But I think there's quite a lot going on here. Loads of rule amendments, lots to change in the books. And I think for me personally, all this has done is just made it a little bit more confusing. And with Kill Team, I've really enjoyed getting it ready and learning it. And the more I've played it though, the more I've kind of been turned off it a little bit with all these rules and looking in all the different places for the rules. I've just found it a little bit annoying. But I'd love to know what you think. How have you been getting on with the game? And have you found it getting easier over time? You getting used to the rules now, more intuitive? And how have you found these errata, these updates, and the commentary? Has that helped you out at all? I'd love to know what you think and hear your thoughts in the comment section below. And also maybe some questions you might have that you would have liked to have seen in the updates that weren't included. So it'd be great to hear from you, great to hear what you think. So let me know in the comment section below. Look out for that video on Line of Sight, Cover and Obscured coming real soon. I'll put that up over the next couple of days. And thanks so much for watching. If you made it this far, then you deserve a medal. It was a long video and we went through quite a lot of different things with the different erratas. But thanks so much for watching. Please like if you like it, subscribe for more videos like this, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to join me next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games. If you like this kind of content and would like to support the channel, then please check out my Patreon page. And thanks to everyone who's joined so far. It's really awesome. We hang out on Discord, talk about the hobby, share ideas and help each other out. And you'll get some perks there that you're not going to find anywhere else. So I'll put a link in the description and it'll be great to see you there.